Greetings to you. My name is Tara Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 247, Engagement. 2020 has been a bonkers year. There's no doubt about that. We're reaching the end of it when I record this vlog for you today. But can I say, more importantly, 2020 has been based on 20 years of pretty appalling policies about work, leisure, production, consumption, families, energy, food, just to name a few key issues. And there are many reasons for that. One of the most important reasons, I think, why we live in such bonkers times is we are living in a post-expertise era. And my great arch nemesis in the right bunch, Jess, who we refer to now as Dr. Jess, asked me in one of our sessions about how we create change. How do we as researchers, how do you as PhD students take the incredible work that you're doing and move it around so that change is enacted? How do you do that? How do you create change? Well, Jess's question, I think, is a really important one this year and every single year. But more importantly, I've been thinking a lot in the last few months, and we've seen it, haven't we? The consequences of ignoring experts and ignoring expertise, of creating pretty dodgy policy based on ill-formed evidence created from problematic research design and methodology. We've heard a lot about fake news. We haven't heard so much about pretty dodgy ideas that have been created by ignoring evidence. So today I wanted to look at a word that lives in the shadows of research. With all the focus on impact, there's actually a much more interesting word, a sister word to impact, that really is much more important. If you like, engagement, which is the word I'm going to talk about today, engagement is the Danny Minogue of research. Obviously, impact is the Kylie Minogue of impact. And that metaphor, obviously, clearly works on many levels. But let's be honest, Danny dances and sings a lot better than Kylie. And yet Danny has ended up a judge on the Australian version of Masked Singer. How can this be? So today I'm going to release this Danny Minogue concept into the light. And yes, I want to talk about engagement. Let's do this. I want to talk about how it is defined, and those definitions exist differently around the world. But I want us to talk through how attention to this word can improve your research and certainly solidify your research outcomes. Too often I think we're using at the moment impact and engagement like Morecambe and Wise or bread and butter. And actually they are very different. They're very different, and where they do align, where they share something, is both engagement and impact have been used in the last 10-15 years to measure research. So these words are used as a way to measure the importance of research. As all issues like this, many proxies go in there, and often inelegant proxies. So demonstrating impact has now basically taken a life of its own in our research policy at the moment. So impact, demonstrating impact, that's a whole thing now. And at its most basic, impact is interested in the quality of your research, noting that the word quality is highly ideological, and where impact is terribly involved and interested in how you choose your topic. So is your topic for your research practical, economically important, or is it a bit weird? Is it a bit esoteric? Now, just a reminder, practical and esoteric, those words are in the eyes of the beholder or the policy of a particular time. But impact does deploy some proxies for quality, and it looks at how research is used, particularly by non-governmental organisations. So that is when we deal with industry and government, so these big words. Now, while research metrics look for research impact over a few years, so let's look at the impact over 5 years. I think most of us know that the impact of research is determined over decades. So as you can see, there's a lot of artificiality around the word impact. Now, engagement is different. It has origins from the French, gager, meaning to pledge. So it is a commitment that is witnessed by others. So there's an agreement to a relationship, okay? So it's a relationship, it's a pledge, and the goal of engagement is to strengthen the relationship. You see how important this is? And by the way, this is the word engaged, like the stage before getting married. This is where the word engaged actually comes from. So it's the step before marriage. It is a promise. It is a pledge. But it also signifies attachment and a meshing, right? So an attachment between two parties. Yeah. So engaged research is oriented towards others. Engaged research increases the value of the research by validating it through a series of networks that overlap. So what this means is, if your research has engagement, engaging research, it is living research, and most importantly, it lives in very special places and times. So this means it works with and through difference. It doesn't marginalise difference, it settles itself in differences and provokes and finds interest and intrigue in the differences. It is sensitive and it's careful in the configuration of technology. It's careful in the deployment of methodology. Ethics and the practical consequences of ethical decisions are crucial in engagement discussions. So as you can see, engagement operates very much in the long term, and engagement is future focused. Remember, being engaged, you are offering a promise or a pledge for a lifetime of marriage. Research is the same, obviously without the sex. Okay. It also recognises, though, the importance of epistemology, that all knowledge, all modes of inquiry are framed by power, and framed by powerful practices. Now, these are great definitions. I find all of these discussions incredibly empowering and inspirational. Great, this is why I got into research. This is the reason I'm here. Brilliant. Now, the challenge is the Australian definition of engagement that we're using in research policy is much smaller than the wonderful, empowering, interesting definitions that I've just used there. It's measured, obviously, quantitatively, and it's measured through a really fascinating proxy. And that proxy is non-governmental investment in research. So how do you tell, if you've got engaged research, that you've got non-governmental income in your research? That's engaged research. So basically, if you've got non-governmental money in your research, you're engaged. So that's the current definition of engagement in Australia. Isn't this going well? Now, of course, it has some pretty fundamental issues with it. Firstly, it focuses, if you notice, on input. So engaged research focuses on input, the money in to the university. It's not exploring the ideas out of the university. So it's input focused for engagement. Good. So if we're looking for engagement, and that is outcomes and how we prove them, why are we focusing on what's coming into the university? Amazing. Why is the focus on money? And what sort of relationships are we building with industry when the focus is on money? Is that actually engaged research? So the reason why so much ambiguity exists in engagement discussions in Australia is because there was never the robust but also caring conversation about why we are doing engagement in the first place, right? Now, in life, we all know you need to start with why. Why am I doing this? And if you don't start with why, if you start with the how and the what, or how will I do this, then you sort of lose your way, because unless you work out why you're doing something, the how and the what don't matter too much. Now, engagement is the same. If we're focused on measuring engagement with proxies like money, that's not going to really take us anywhere, because how is that engaged, right? So that's the problem with the term in Australia. So we need to start with what is engagement and why are we doing it? So let me start with the whys of engagement. Now, engaged research right at the start, focuses on end users. Now, end users is one of those weird phrases I never thought would be coming out of my mouth, but let's just go there. Okay, so engaged research focuses on end users. Now, other words for end users include citizens, the audience of our research, stakeholders, basically crew that are outside of our universities. Okay, but further, so it's an end user, great, but further it then thinks about the transfer of knowledge, of technology, of methodologies, and that transfer exists for mutual benefit. Mutual benefit. Now, why this matters is engagement must be tracked. All sorts of stuff happens in our culture. Research says, oh, I'm an engaged researcher. I am, mate. I'm an engaged researcher. Great. Engagement has to be proven. There has to be an evidential base that shows that engagement, how it happens and why it happens. You have to prove it. Okay, you can't just say it, you've got to prove it. Therefore, it is such a great idea while you are doing a PhD, wow, yes, to start to gather the information about your research and how it moves. Open a file up, have a section on your CV, here's your research, and just start to track how it's being used. The movement of the ideas, exciting. And try and think about, if you can, while you're tracking that, the movement of those ideas, that research, beyond the university. And if you can, go one more step. The movement of ideas outside of the university for the mutual benefit of stakeholders, citizens outside of the university. So just start to look gently at those steps. And there are ways to do that. One way is to monitor a series of activities, okay? And you're looking for a series of activities that provide some indication of mutual benefit. So I wanted to sort of provide a list of those activities for you to start to monitor, okay? And they include media coverage. So any media coverage you get for the research, log that article or that radio presentation, that TV presentation, that podcast, log it, but then go a bit further. Log how that podcast moves. Get audience information if you can. Also social media activity. So there's a tweet, what happens to the tweet? Good analytics on that, use them. Public lectures are a great way to start to show and build the stakeholder base for your research. Consultancy, consultation processes, working with organisations in and on their own terms, crucial. Governmental bodies, schools are crucial in terms of engagement, crucial, but also serving on advisory boards, expert witnesses in court cases, absolutely. You might be asked to do different thesis examination that shows expertise, again, the movement of ideas, but also prizes, awards, and I'm borrowing this phrase from the United Kingdom, markers of esteem. Now, esteem, again, is a very complicated word, and I might end up doing a vlog on esteem. I find it very interesting. The awards in and of themselves, the prizes in and of themselves, don't mean anything. Yeah, that's nice, it's nice, have a nice day, that's great. Not a big focus on prizes myself, but what they do signify is that the research is moving and some people are interested in it. Now, from that prize, you need to unpick the prize or the award and work out why it happened and how the research is moving for that particular group. Okay, so markers of esteem are important, but you can't just sort of bask in the sun. You've got to unpick them a bit and work out why they're happening. Okay, so none of those attributes that I've just discussed constitute engagement. That's really important. They are channels to find evidence that may indicate engagement. So while the Australian definition of engagement in our universities is impossibly narrow, I did want to talk about the university systems around the world that use engagement very, very well. And the British university system uses engagement very well. They've been doing it for decades, but also the Irish university system, the whole system, the network of the Irish universities do engagement beautifully, okay? And if you want to see just one university that has created beautiful strategies for engagement for all disciplines, all colleagues at different stages of their career, I really recommend to you the University of Sheffield. And if you put the University of Sheffield and engagement into Google, you will see incredible work. What an achievement that, I mean, the whole university has committed to engagement, and they're doing it properly and well, and they're supporting early career researchers to start their engagement journey. Just tremendous. So let's start with these successful definitions of engagement and work out what they're doing with them. So, engagement activities can lead to impact, but they may not. And that's cool, by the way. That's that thing about breaking up impact and engagement. Engagement in and of itself is important, okay? Engagement activities can involve methodological innovations, and that's great. So really thinking about the changes to research design, okay? Great stuff. Engagement activities takes your research, takes your expertise, and works with it. And I'm working with it like I'm working with clay, working with it with partners, with collaborators. So as you can see, if you get nothing else out of the vlog today, engagement is not dissemination. Engagement is not about you do your research and then at the end you go, hi end users, here's my research, enjoy. Right? Dissemination and engagement are very different things. Engagement exists all the way through the project. It shapes and directs your research. Now, this is a great definition. I find, again, this incredibly inspiring. I'm working on a new phrase at the moment called servant research, which links often with service leadership, those of you that know the servant leadership literature. But servant research is quite an evocative phrase for me that I'm working on at the moment. So, for example, let's just pick a couple of examples. So, say you are working with a regional tourism authority, then we co-create the research design, the determination of what matters, what is important here. That is a shared goal. The words are spoken, the pledge occurs, and there is a shared goal. Then, through iterations of feedback and communication, there's a continual movement between the university academic and the regional tourism authority. So there is planned, organised feedback iterations. So this version of engagement is used with a lot of other phrases. We're starting to hear a lot about co-design, right? Co-created research, collaborative research. These words all play nicely with engagement. And of course, all the material I'm talking about today works incredibly well with community organisations. Okay, so this mode of collaboration thinks actively about new ways of communicating your research. So instead of, I'm doing a conference presentation, like 3 people are there, they've given me 15 minutes. Instead of doing a conference presentation, how about you think about other ways to engage and share your research? And it may be through an exhibition, it may be through photo story, it may be through a podcast. So as you can see, this version of engagement is evocative. It's incredibly meaningful. So the why of and for engagement is incredibly clear, and it directs the what and the how by starting with the why. So when you're working on engagement, engagement has 3 stages. So I hope this helps you. If you're going, right, this is great, love the idea, how do I do it? Think about these 3 stages to move you on your engagement journey. There are stages of planning, okay? Stage 1, firstly, you need to start there. You need to be clear on your audience, your stakeholders, your co-designers, if you want to use that language. Who are your co-creators? And be very clear on that group. who is the audience for your engagement activities. Think about what you want to achieve with those co-creators. And remember, this changes everything really. We're looking at a two-way engagement. Have you got a strategy whereby the audience, your stakeholders, the co-creators, are involved right from the start and iteratively enable the researcher's development? So how will your research inform and infuse their lives, and how will their life experience inform and infuse your research? So this could be physicists working with shipbuilders on corrosion. Fantastic. This could be tourist academics working with primary food producers to develop gastronomic tourism. Fantastic example. So therefore, as you can see, right at the start, we've got to start with who's the audience? What are we doing here? Who are the people? And then be clear about how you're going to get that feedback and what you are going to do with that feedback. How will you acknowledge the feedback and make it part of your research? Okay, so that's stage one. Think deeply about your audience, your stakeholders. And then think about how you're going to create that dialogue. Engaged. The two-way engagement. Second step, communicating your research. Now, the most important thing, and I'll use the phrase, I hate it, but I'll use it, don't think you have to dumb down your research, right? Because what does that suggest about the citizens that we're serving? If you have to dumb stuff down, right? That's offensive. That's offensive. But what you do need to think about is what's required so that your research is communicated effectively. Okay, so basically, if you like, what subject matter background is required to understand the foundations or the frame of that research? In many ways, you could call this disciplinary literacy. So, information must be presented in a way that your audience is literate enough in the discipline, in the subject matter, so that they're not able to understand it, but they're able to contribute to it. So if your audience understands what's going on, then they will share your excitement, they'll offer you great feedback, ask the right questions, take the right answers, but they'll also then go, right, well this research is meaningful, and I'm going to embed this research in my life, in my daily practices about food, about how I think about corrosion. They're going to embed the practices in what they do on a daily basis. Okay, so stage one was finding the audience. Stage two, communicating the research. Stage three, this is the hard one. You knew it was coming. Demonstrating change. Engagement is not about assumptions. It's not about, oh, I'm so aware of my stakeholders. That's nice. Engagement is not about assumptions. It's about evidence. It's about demonstrating change. So, how do you do this? Ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. Keep getting feedback. Feedback. Evaluate your research. Evaluate it. Monitor the media discussions. And take the quant information. So, you're running an event, a stakeholder event. How many people turned up? Get the numbers. How many people have used the research? And again, get into that word used. What does use of research mean? Unpick it, explain it to me. And make sure that when you're evaluating, you are asking the right questions of your audience, and you've empowered your audience enough to give you meaningful answers. Oh yeah. So let me give you just a great example. I do a lot of work in tourism, as a lot of you know, particularly as part of regional development, which is something I believe in very strongly. And I've been very impressed in the last 4 or 5 years about sustainable tourism as a project. And the Journal of Sustainable Tourism is now in volume 28, so it's a pretty mature paradigm now. But I've noticed how the journal's methodology has been changing, and they've based the journal's methodology on sustainable development goals. Respect. And through refereeing, they fast track the research through peer review so it can contribute to current debates. So if there is something that's very timely that has arrived, they have the protocols in place to go, that has an engagement opportunity for these stakeholders, let's move this through peer review and get it out in open access. So they're working, this journal, incredibly hard on communication systems, targeted communication systems, so that they're creating this community of sustainable tourism researchers on social media, and they're opening out the research to allow the engagements to be activated into the next iterations of the research. Very impressive. So as you can see, if you take engagement seriously, the very nature of an academic journal transforms. Wow, this is big, this is big. And for us, engagement is a great moment of reflection for us as researchers. If we take engagement seriously, then we lose sole control of our research. We do. Because it confirms that we're not the holder of all truth, of all expertise. It confirms that we are here to serve. We're here to serve. We are accountable for our research, and we are accountable for the changes that we would like to see in society. We can see the value in multiple modes of engagement when recognising most clearly, obviously, Indigenous research, decolonising our research. I would argue we can't decolonise research until engagement is understood properly. Co-design, methodology, transfer of knowledge, everything, right? Similarly, a lot of the feminist projects, the trans community projects, require engagement questions, the whys, at the start before anything else actually happens. Put another way, we as researchers, we have to be the change that we want to see. We have to be the change that we want to see. Recognise the value of diverse views, the value of dialogue, the value of being humble, the value of listening. The value of listening. That is the positive consequence of the engagement concept. Now, there are many critiques, a lot of them emerging in response to the pretty dominant Australian rendering of the engagement issue. For example, Benson, Oppenheim in 2005 offered a much more negative critique of engagement. They described engagement as, quote, the commodification of academic labour, end of quote. That's pretty clear, the commodification of academic labour. And they argued that this engagement topic moves academics away from academic freedom. Yeah. Now, that might be correct. That might be correct. But we also have to probe, I think, our very definition of freedom. To quote the great philosopher Chris Christopherson in his great treatise, Bobby McGee, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Good phrase for 2020. And you see, for me, engagement is based on the idea that if people's lives are going to be changed by research, then they have a right to be involved in the design of that research. So when we're enacting research planning, research design, we activate participatory methods. We use words like dialogue, consultation, community, collaboration, involvement, empowerment. These engagement methods focus on co-design, but also debate, attention to definitions, and thinking actively about words like benefits of research, consequences of research, with attention to monitoring those words all the way through, rather than dissemination at the end. And as you can see, if we take this seriously, methodology, epistemology, and ontology all transform. And the very notion of quality research also transforms. And wow, that's not a bad word to think about, is it? I wish you love, light, and peace. Tia.